After I hated my famous sister for years, I found the notebook she left behind, and what it exposed about our parents and me changed everything forever. My sister Eva was the kind of person strangers remembered, not because she was loud. She actually wasn't. But she walked into a room, and people adjusted themselves around her, like flowers turning toward light. She was beautiful in a polished, impossible way, the kind that made adults smile softer and speak kinder. By 16, she was doing magazine shoots. By 21, she was in movies. By 26, she was the pride of our family, the proof that at least one of us had become somebody worth pointing at. And me? I was Nolan, 29, accountant, quiet, reliable, the son people forgot to ask follow-up questions about. Growing up, I told myself I didn't care, that I liked being invisible, that somebody had to be normal in a family that treated my sister like a miracle sent down just to improve the bloodline. But that wasn't true. I cared so much it curdled in me. Every birthday dinner turned into a celebration of Eva's latest award, latest cover, latest interview. Every holiday somehow became about whether she could make it, whether her schedule allowed it, whether the studio needed her somewhere else. When she did show up, my mother cried. My father stood straighter. I disappeared even further. The worst part was that Eva acted like none of this bothered me. She'd ruffle my hair when we were kids, squeeze my shoulder when we were older, bring me expensive gifts from places I'd never been. Tokyo, Paris, Venice. Like souvenirs could make up for being the sun, while I spent my whole life as one of the cold things orbiting around her. So I resented her. Quietly at first, then professionally. By the time I was 25, I had a whole private case built against her in my head. Exhibit A, she was always the favorite. Exhibit B, she always knew it. Exhibit C, every time I messed up, somehow she still came out looking noble. I thought I had proof. Like the time I got drunk in high school and dented Dad's truck, and Eva somehow convinced him she'd taken it out late after curfew. Or when I got caught cheating on a chemistry test, and the principal called home, and suddenly the conversation turned into concern about Eva distracting herself too much trying to help Nolan study. Even my failures seemed to make her look saintly. I didn't understand why she did that. At the time, I thought it was a power move. The kind of generosity that humiliates the person receiving it. Then last autumn, Eva moved out of the penthouse she'd owned downtown and into a place in Los Angeles. She told everyone it was temporary. A 6-month shoot. Maybe longer. My mother asked me to help pack the last boxes because your sister trusts you. I almost laughed at that. But I went. And somewhere between her old sweaters and a cracked leather jewelry box, I found a notebook that changed everything. It wasn't hidden very well. That's what still gets me. If Eva had truly wanted no one to find it, she would have locked it in a safe or had some assistant shred it. Instead, it was wedged behind a row of old scripts inside a low cabinet in her study, wrapped in a silk scarf I recognized from some award show years ago. Dark blue, gold trim, still faintly smelling like her perfume. I only touched it because I was moving things into keep, toss, and ship piles, and it slid forward when I lifted a stack of binders. At first I thought it was just another work notebook. The cover was plain black, edges worn. But when I opened it, I saw her handwriting immediately. Sharp, slanted, precise. Age 17. Don't read this, Nolan. Seriously. I actually smiled at that. It felt so annoyingly like her. Even in private, she had to be clever. I should have put it back. That's the decent thing, right? Close it, wrap it up, send it on. But I was alone in her apartment, standing in a room full of evidence that she'd had a larger life by 29 than I would in 3 lifetimes. And I saw my own name on the first page. So I kept reading. The entry was dated 11 years earlier. She wrote about a school fundraiser, one of those awful banquet things where local donors smile too hard and children get paraded around as proof of community values. I remembered that night because I'd knocked over a tray of drinks and shattered glasses all over the polished floor. Red punch on a white tablecloth. Adults staring. Mom hissing my name under her breath. I had expected Dad to explode in the car ride home. He didn't. Because Eva had stepped in before he could. According to the diary, she told them she'd distracted me on purpose. Told them she'd been teasing me, showing off, acting spoiled. She wrote that Dad looked relieved to have a reason to be angry at her instead. That line made me stop. He always calms down faster when it's me. He expects better from Nolan in a disappointed way, but with me it becomes personal, and personal is easier to absorb. I read it 3 times. Easier to absorb. Like anger was weather, and she was volunteering to stand outside in it. I sat down on the floor right there in her study, because I remembered that night completely differently. I remembered Eva rolling her eyes when Mom snapped at her. Remembered thinking she loved drama, loved pulling focus, loved making every family disaster somehow loop back to her. But in her diary, there was no performance, no grand speech, Just blunt, cramped handwriting across cream paper. Mom said I ruined everything by making scenes. Good. Better me than him. Nolan already looked like he wanted to disappear. That one actually hurt. Not because it was dramatic. Because it was accurate. I had wanted to disappear. And somehow she had seen that. I told myself one entry didn't mean anything. Memory is slippery. Maybe she was rewriting the past to comfort herself. Maybe everybody keeps a private version of events where they're a little more noble than they were. I certainly did. So I kept reading for reasons I pretended were investigative. The next entries were from the same year. Then the year after. Pages about auditions, school, fights with our parents, endless pressure over grades and posture and public image. My mother had always been exacting, but on those pages she became almost unrecognizable, measuring Eva's meals, criticizing her skin, timing her runs, telling her the wrong role could ruin her future before it even started. Dad was worse in a quieter way. Not cruel exactly, just obsessed, focused. Like Eva's success was his second chance at a life he felt cheated out of. He didn't yell as much in her writing. Somehow that made it uglier. He just withheld warmth until she achieved something. I should say this clearly. None of that had ever been visible to me. From where I stood as the younger brother, Eva was adored, pampered, defended. But in the diary, she wrote like someone living under glass. If I gain 3 pounds, Mom notices before she says good morning. Dad said I sounded lazy in the callback because my voice dropped at the end of the line. I'm so tired I could throw up. I got the part. They hugged each other before they hugged me. That last one stayed with me. I flipped through faster then, looking for my name without admitting to myself that I wanted to find it. There were a lot more mentions than I expected. When I was 15 and got suspended for mouthing off to a teacher, she wrote 2 pages about talking Dad out of canceling my summer trip. When I was 17 and wrecked my relationship with my first serious girlfriend by being stupid and insecure, she apparently spent an hour on the phone with the girl convincing her not to tell our mother the humiliating details, because, quote, Nolan already punishes himself enough. He doesn't need Mom using it as a character study for the next 10 years. I laughed once when I read that, but it came out wrong. She knew us too well. Then I found an entry from the year she booked the role that made her famous. That was the year I hated her most. Every conversation in our house became about contracts, press training, and whether she should move to New York for a while. I was in college then, home for weekends, watching our parents act like they'd personally manufactured her success. I stopped calling much. When I did, she'd ask about classes, about whether I was eating, about my roommate, and I'd answer with one-word replies because I thought she was being fake. In the diary she wrote, Nolan barely looks at me lately. I think he thinks I left him behind on purpose. I don't know how to explain that I'm trying to make enough money that he never has to beg Dad for anything again. I closed the notebook. Actually closed it, set it on the rug, and stared at the opposite wall like it had insulted me. Because I didn't know what to do with that sentence. I had spent years building my anger around the idea that she never noticed what this family did to me. But what if she had noticed all of it? What if I had been wrong from the beginning? I took the diary home. Not proudly. Not with some noble intention of returning it later. I slipped it into my backpack like a thief and drove back to my apartment with my pulse knocking hard in my throat. For 2 days I didn't open it again. I went to work. Answered emails. Sat through a budget review. Nodded at things people said. But my mind kept circling the same thought. If Eva really had spent years protecting me, then I had spent years resenting the wrong person. And if that was true, it said something ugly about me. On the 3rd night, I poured a drink, sat at my kitchen table, and opened the notebook again. The pattern became impossible to ignore. It wasn't one dramatic sacrifice. It was dozens. Small, consistent, almost boring in their repetition, which somehow made them feel more real. When I was 13 and got caught shoplifting headphones with 2 boys from school, Dad apparently wanted to pull me out of baseball and make me work weekends at his office so he can learn consequences. Eva convinced him I'd only done it because I was trying to impress older kids. She wrote that she deliberately picked a fight at dinner later that night, baiting him into switching targets. When I was 19 and came home after failing 2 classes, she wrote that Mom called me lazy, then weak, then not built for pressure. Eva interrupted and said maybe the problem was that nobody in this family knew how to love someone who wasn't performing. I remembered that fight. Or I thought I did. I remembered Mom slapping the table, Dad telling Eva to stop dramatizing everything, me staring at my plate in fury because somehow even my academic collapse had turned into another showcase for Eva's righteous speeches. But in the diary, after the argument, she wrote, Nolan wouldn't look at me. He probably thinks I was showing off. I wish I knew how to help him without embarrassing him. Every rescue feels like another humiliation when you're a man and younger and already hurting. I had to put the diary down again after that. Because she was right there too. She understood why I hated being defended. why every act of protection felt like being made smaller. And she did it anyway. There was one entry I read 4 times in a row. It described a magazine profile writer visiting our house when Eva was 23. Huge opportunity. National press. Career-defining. I remembered the day because I'd shown up unexpectedly after a bad breakup and looked wrecked. I thought she was irritated. She had barely spoken to me while the reporter was there, and later she canceled dinner with our parents and claimed she had a migraine. In the diary she wrote, "The reporter kept asking about Nolan after seeing him in the hallway. I said he hates attention and that he's private. Truth, he looked like he'd been gutted. If that woman had smelled blood, she would have put him in the piece. Canceled dinner so he wouldn't have to sit through mom turning his heartbreak into a lecture. Ordered him soup instead. He pretended not to notice. I remembered the soup. I remembered being too raw to ask where it came from. I remembered assuming the concierge sent it. A stupid detail. Tiny. But something about that undid me more than the bigger revelations. Because that was the thing the diary kept revealing. Not just the dramatic moments, but the 1,000 invisible adjustments she'd made around me for years. And I never thanked her. Not once. After that, I started remembering things differently. Not inventing new memories. Just re-seeing old ones through a lens I'd refused before. There was the time in middle school when a gossip blog posted unflattering paparazzi photos of Eva, and people at my school started making jokes. I got into a fight over it. Bloody nose, split lip, one glorious punch before a teacher dragged me off. I remembered being furious when Eva came to pick me up and acted almost cold in the principal's office. She told them violence was unacceptable, told me I had to learn control. I didn't speak to her the entire drive home. The diary entry from that night said, "I wanted to hug him the second I saw his face. But if I comfort him there, the school calls home and says he's unstable and overattached and angry because of me. So I stayed calm. He thinks I'm ashamed of him. God, that boy looked so brave standing there bleeding for me." I put my hand over my mouth when I read that. Because I'd carried that day as proof she cared more about her image than me. Instead, she'd been protecting me from becoming another storyline attached to her. Then there was college graduation. I'd barely wanted my family there, but of course they came. Eva arrived late from a shoot, all sunglasses and apology, and half the crowd noticed. Cameras weren't allowed, but people still whispered. I was already on edge. During lunch afterward, Mom spent 20 straight minutes talking about whether Eva should accept a role overseas. Not one question about my actual degree until dessert. I remember snapping at everyone. I accused them of turning my graduation into another stop on the Eva tour. I said worse things too. Childish things. Cruel things. I remember Eva going completely silent. In her diary she wrote, "He was right. It was his day, and they still made it mine." But when Nolan said I liked it that way, I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to tell him I would trade every premiere this year for one family meal where he felt seen. That sentence sat in me like glass. Because I'd always framed my resentment as moral clarity. Like I was the only one honest enough to name the imbalance. But what if she already knew? What if she hated it too? What if she was trapped inside the pedestal I envied? The entry that broke me, though, wasn't about some big family event. It was about a Tuesday. No special occasion. No crisis. Just some ordinary weekday from 8 years ago. She wrote that Dad had called me soft after I told him I didn't want to apply for law school. Apparently after I left the room, Eva told him maybe I was the only one in the house brave enough not to live someone else's script. I didn't know about that conversation. Never heard it. Never suspected it. She ended the entry with, "Nolan thinks I'm the loyal one because I comply better. He doesn't understand that some of my obedience is camouflage. If they're proud of me, they look at him less critically. That's the trade. I don't know if he'll ever know that. Maybe it's better if he doesn't." I stared at that page until the words blurred. Some of my obedience is camouflage. Part of her ideal perfection, her discipline, politeness, constant achievement, wasn't vanity. It was cover. She had made herself into the child our parents wanted, so they'd leave me room to be human. And all these years, I thought she was just better at being loved. By then I was sleeping badly. Not in a dramatic way. I just kept waking up at 3 a.m. with old scenes replaying in my head. Except now, every one of them had a second meaning. Eva laughing too brightly at dinner after Dad criticized her weight. Eva volunteering to take blame when I forgot our mother's birthday call. Eva sending me money in college under random excuses, leftover per diem, bonus from a campaign, "I don't need this," buy groceries, when apparently she had written pages about how ashamed she was that I still felt I had to ask Dad for help. I started noticing what wasn't in the diary too. She almost never praised herself. When she described sacrifices, it wasn't with martyr energy. Mostly she sounded exhausted. Sometimes bitter. Sometimes weirdly funny. Booked the role, lost 3 pounds, got the approval nod from Mom. Amazing what the female body can accomplish on almonds and fear. Dad says I'm his rock. Translation, emotional landfill with good posture. That one made me laugh out loud, and then feel immediately sick for laughing. A week after I found the diary, my mother called asking if I'd mailed the last of Eva's things to Los Angeles. I lied and said yes. Then she said, "Your sister sounded tired yesterday. Fame takes such a toll." I almost said, "So did you?" Instead I swallowed it. Because what could I accuse them of? Loving her badly? Needing too much from her? Using her as a shield without ever admitting it? Those are hard crimes to prosecute. Especially when the accused are your parents and the evidence is a black notebook they were never supposed to see. So I kept reading. Toward the back, the entries got sparser. More adult. Less daily detail, more fragments. Hotels. Flights. Press junkets. Panic attacks she called breathing glitches. Relationships that looked glamorous in magazines and hollow in private. The loneliness of being known by strangers and misunderstood by everybody who mattered. Then I found an entry from last year. That one stunned me more than the teenage pages. Because even after all this time, even after I'd become openly distant, only answering half her calls, avoiding family vacations if she was there, she was still writing about me. Nolan barely spoke at dinner tonight. He's polite now, which is worse than angry. Anger at least still reaches. I think he decided years ago that I belonged with them. Maybe that's fair. Maybe from where he stood, I did. Then, I almost told him everything tonight. About Dad. About Mom. About the years I took the heat on purpose. But what would that do except make him feel guilty for surviving differently? I don't want gratitude from him. I just want one honest conversation before one of us dies. I had to get up from the table after that. Walked into my bathroom. Stood there with both hands on the sink. Because guilt is a strange emotion. People talk about it like it's noble, but mostly it feels childish. Like wanting to go back in time and shake the worst version of yourself until he listens. One honest conversation before one of us dies. She had written that. And I had spent the last 3 years acting like she was a decorative stranger who happened to share my last name. There was one final section in the diary I avoided for almost 2 days. Not because I didn't want answers. Because I was starting to understand I might not like the last answer at all. The entries around the move were different. Less polished. Almost rushed. A few pages had smudged ink, like she'd written fast, and closed the notebook before things dried. She wrote about being exhausted. About not wanting another campaign, another publicist, another round of reinvention. About needing distance from our parents. That part didn't surprise me anymore. What surprised me was how often my name came up in those last pages. I called Nolan today and almost asked if I could stay with him instead of booking the hotel before I thought better of it. I don't think he'd say no. I think he'd say yes out of obligation, and that might hurt more. Mom asked whether Nolan is dating anyone serious. Translation: is there another life she can supervise? Redirected the conversation. Small victory. If I leave for a while, maybe he'll finally have room to remember me without all the family noise around me. Or maybe I'm flattering myself. Then I found the entry that explained why the diary had been left behind at all. It wasn't an accident. It was dated 2 days before she moved. Packed almost everything. Left the old journals in the study cabinet. Maybe stupid. Maybe deliberate. I keep thinking of labeling one. For Nolan, when he's ready to hate me less. That's too theatrical, even for me. If he finds them, he finds them. If he doesn't, maybe that's kinder. I just sat there after reading that. Because suddenly the whole thing felt less like a violation and more like a message she couldn't force me to receive. Not a trap. Not manipulation. An opening. I turned the page and found the last full entry. It started normally. Flight details, irritation at her manager, some note about a script revision. Then it shifted. I used to think protecting Nolan meant standing between him and impact. Take the blame. Deflect the criticism. Outperform everyone so he'd have air. Maybe that worked when we were kids. Maybe later it just made me look complicit. He looked at me for years like I had joined the winning side. I can't blame him for that. Winning is what it looked like from outside. Then the last lines. Truth. I built perfect out of whatever would keep them busy. I wore the crown because crowns are heavy and distracting, and parents staring upward don't always notice the child beside them. The problem is, after a while, everyone forgets the crown is made of metal, including the person wearing it. And below that, if Nolan ever reads this, I hope he understands one thing. I never wanted him to be me. I wanted him to stay soft. I wanted at least one of us to stay real. I cried then. Not elegantly. Not the cinematic kind with one noble tear. I cried like someone who had been wrong in a way that rearranged his bones. Because all my life I had looked at Eva and seen ease, privilege, superiority. And what she had actually built was armor. Armor our parents admired because it gleamed. Armor I mistook for vanity because I didn't see the bruises underneath. I called her 3 times that night. No answer. Time zone, I told myself. She was probably on set. Probably asleep. Probably with someone. But the panic that rose in me felt weirdly old, like some younger version of me finally understanding what he was about to lose. The next morning she texted, "In meetings all day? Everything okay?" I stared at that message for 10 full minutes. Everything okay? As if we were the kind of siblings who asked each other that casually. As if I hadn't spent years training her to expect distance. As if there was any honest answer shorter than no, because I finally know what you did for me, and I don't know how to live inside that. I texted back, "Can we talk tonight?" "Actually talk." She replied after 20 minutes. "That sounds ominous." But yes, I spent the whole day wrecked. At work, I opened the same spreadsheet 6 times. My friend Ben asked if I was sick. I said allergies, which felt too stupid to correct. At 9:30 p.m., my phone rang. Her contact still said Eva. No heart, no nickname. Just Eva, clean and formal, like a coworker. I answered on the second ring. "Hey," she said. "Just that. Light. Careful." I had imagined this moment 100 ways once I found the diary. In none of them was my voice this broken when I said her name. There was a pause. Then she said, quietly, "Nolan." And that was enough to undo me. I told her I'd found the notebook. I apologized immediately, before she could react. For reading it. For taking it. For all of it. Really, though I didn't have the courage to say that yet. She was silent so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she let out one short breath and said, "I wondered if you would." Not angry. Not surprised. Just tired. I asked if she had left it there on purpose. She laughed a little, but there was no humor in it. Half on purpose. Which is probably the most manipulative possible answer. "You weren't manipulative. Let's not overcorrect," she said softly. "I've had other flaws." I should have laughed. Instead I said, "Why didn't you tell me?" Another pause. "Because by the time we were adults," she said, "I couldn't tell if explaining would help you or just make you feel guilty. And guilt isn't love. I didn't want that from you." That line hit hard. I asked if it was all true, which sounded absurd the second I said it, as if she'd written hundreds of pages of fiction for no audience. But she understood what I meant. "Yes," she said. "Not because I was a saint. Sometimes I protected you because I loved you. Sometimes because I was angry and needed somewhere to put it. Sometimes because I didn't know how to stop being useful." There it was again, that brutal honesty she'd apparently been carrying the whole time. I told her I remembered everything wrong. "No," she said. "You remembered it from where you were standing." And somehow that made me cry harder. Because even then, even with every right to be furious, she was still making room for me. We stayed on the phone for nearly 3 hours. There was no dramatic soundtrack, no perfect healing speech, no sudden clean rewrite of 20 years. Mostly it was messy, overlapping, sometimes awkward, sometimes so honest it made my chest hurt. I asked her if she had really been that miserable growing up. She was quiet for a while before answering. "I don't know if miserable is the word," she said. "Efficiently loved, maybe." I laughed through tears at that, because of course she could still make pain sound clever. She told me things the diary only hinted at. How mom used to pinch the skin at her waist and call it preventive honesty. How dad never directly said she was responsible for family morale, but everyone behaved like she was. How every success came with a new demand attached to it. Bigger role, better body, cleaner interviews, more gratitude, less mess. I said, "I thought they worshipped you." "They did," she said. "That doesn't always feel good from the inside." Then I asked the thing that had been tearing at me all week. "Did you ever hate me for it?" "For what?" "For needing you to do all that." She answered so fast it made me feel worse and better at the same time. "No." Then, after a second, "I hated that you didn't know. I hated that when you looked at me, you saw the side of the system that hurt you. But I never hated you." I couldn't speak after that. There was one memory we kept circling. I was 24. She invited me to a premiere after party. I refused. Told her I wasn't interested in being an accessory in her glamorous life. She got cold after that. We barely spoke for months. I asked her what had really happened there. She sighed. "That night mom had spent an hour beforehand asking whether I could get you into a better job through one of my contacts. She kept calling you wasted potential. I invited you because I thought if you came, you'd meet people outside this family and maybe see a bigger world. When you said no," she paused. "It felt like you were rejecting me, not the party." That one hurt in a new way, because I remembered how righteous I had felt. How sure I was that I was protecting my dignity. We had several moments like that. Old wounds reopened, cleaned, restitched. Not every revelation made me look terrible. Some of them made us both sad. We were two kids surviving the same house in opposite ways, then punishing each other for the distortions it created. Near the end of the call, when both of us were quieter, I said, "I thought your perfection was real." She laughed, and this time there was warmth in it. "Nolan, my perfection was a hostage negotiation." That line is probably the most Eva sentence ever spoken. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You know what hurts most? Not that you were angry. You had reasons. It's that I let you think I was stronger than I was. I kept performing competence so long, even with you, that maybe I taught you not to ask if I was okay. I sat there in the dark with that. Because she was right. I had never asked. Not once in all the years she was carrying us both in ways I refused to see. It's been 4 months since I found the diary. We talk every Sunday now. Not always about deep things. Sometimes about absolutely nothing. Bad coffee. Her neighbors. My disastrous attempt to date again. A feral cat that has apparently adopted the alley behind my building. The weather in Los Angeles versus the weather back home. Ordinary sibling things we should have had years ago. Last month I flew out to see her. I was weirdly nervous at the airport, like I was meeting someone new wearing the face of someone I'd known my whole life. But when she saw me coming through arrivals, she smiled in that tired, familiar way and opened her arms. I hugged her first. I don't know if she understood what that cost me emotionally, but she held on longer than usual, and I think she did. She looks smaller in private than she does on screens. Less mythic, more human. There are lines near her eyes now I don't remember from before. A thin scar near her wrist. A habit of pressing her thumb into her palm when she's stressed. Tiny signs of a life lived at high pressure. I notice those things now. Maybe that's what guilt turns into if you let it mature long enough. Attention. Not performative remorse. Not groveling. Just paying real attention at last. We had dinner on her balcony the second night, city lights below us, some overpriced pasta going cold because neither of us was eating much. At one point I said, "I'm sorry I made you the villain in my head for so long." She looked at me for a while, then said, "I'm sorry I let you do it." That's the thing about belated understanding. It doesn't erase the lost years. It just makes them quieter to carry. I still have the diary. She told me to keep it. Consider it evidence, she said. Or blackmail. Whatever helps. Classic Eva. Sometimes I read random pages when I start slipping back into old bitterness about our parents, our childhood, the shape it gave both of us. Not because the diary excuses everything. It doesn't. But it reminds me that love can look wrong from the outside. That protection can wear the face of perfection. That some people survive by becoming whatever the room demands. And if you only judge the mask, you miss the person suffocating underneath it. For most of my life, I thought my sister stood above me. Now I know the truth is sadder and better at the same time. She stood in front of me. And by the time I understood that, we were both grown, both damaged, both late. But not too late. I used to think nostalgia was warm. It isn't. Not always. Sometimes it's just grief with good lighting. Sometimes it's realizing the person you envied was bleeding quietly beside you the whole time. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it's getting one more chance to say the thing you should have said years ago. So I say it now, even if only to myself some nights. My sister was never perfect. She was tired. She was scared. She was brilliant. She was trapped. And she loved me a lot more than I knew.